Skater Girl vs. Head Cheerleader Part 2. Chapter 1, The Return to Claremont. Claremont High smelled exactly like Rae remembered: floor wax, old pom-poms, and ambition that never aired out. The gym's fluorescent lights hummed a note that made her molars ache. She rolled her board along beside her, wheels silent out of respect for the sacred waxed floor, and tried not to laugh at the glossy banner strung between the hoops. Art and Athletics, Find Your Balance. Hosted by Rae Delgado, Community Muralist, and Avery Cole, Youth Programs Liaison. Liaison, Rae murmured, tasting the word like a fancy pastry. Better than former head cheerleader who can organize your life and your snack drawer, Avery said behind her, voice warm, amused. She wore a blazer that could cut a man and white sneakers that could save him. Her hair was up, her lipstick decisive. She looked like a TED Talk you accidentally fell in love with. Rae smirked. I did fall in love with a TED Talk. Avery's eyes softened. I fell for a delinquent with paint under her nails. Alleged delinquent, Rae corrected. My priors are art supplies. They grinned at each other like they were still 19 and kissing behind the bleachers. They weren't. They were very adult and scandalously responsible now. Mostly. A cough snapped them apart. Coach Whitlock, whistle, clipboard, skepticism materialized by the free throw line. Ladies. Remember the district's professional conduct guidelines. No fraternizing on school grounds. Rae raised both hands. We'll fraternize strictly in the subjunctive. Avery elbowed her, smile locked in place. We're delighted to be here, Coach. Delight is fine, Whitlock said. Optics are better. She handed them a packet each. Code of Conduct, Youth Mentorship Pilot. Rae's stomach dipped. Clause 7, no public displays of affection between staff, contractors, or guests while on campus. Clause 9. No social media posts implying endorsement of romantic relationships during district programs. Rae didn't look at Avery. She didn't have to. Avery's inhale told her everything. This was the price of the grant and the city council stipend. Be palatable. Be inspiring. Be in love off camera. Kids began to trickle in, nervous, curious, clutching sketchbooks or knee pads. A freshman with a buzz cut and a binder full of stickered wolves hovered near Rae's board. Is that a 8.25 deck? They asked, trying to sound casual. 8.5, Rae said, crouching to show them the trucks. You skate? Not yet, they said, which Rae always translated as I want to but I'm scared. I draw, though. They flipped the binder open. Wolves that looked like comets. Girls with lightning in their hands. They're sick, Rae said, honest. We'll make space for both. Across the court, Avery was freedom with a spreadsheet. She piloted shy bodies into warm-ups, turned chaos into choreography without breaking a sweat. When a cluster of boys snickered at a girl's hiney attempts, Avery blew the whistle and smiled sweetly. Cool, you're volunteers. Teaching assistants now. 10 burpees. Be kind or be tired. Rae's heart did the thing. The dangerous thing. Between rotations, Avery drifted close, voice low. You good? Clause 7, Rae said, flicking the packet. Feels like being back in the closet's waiting room. Avery's mouth tightened. It's temporary. We get the program off the ground, we use our seats at the table to change the rules. Rae nodded, not trusting herself to say I hate hiding us in the one place that made us hide the longest. Instead, she grinned. Meet me at the half-court line after class. I'll show you a kickflip you'll pretend not to be impressed by. I'm always impressed, Avery said, soft enough to keep. Then louder, to the room, stations. Art with Rae, movement with me, switch on the whistle. It almost felt easy. For an hour they built a new language. Graphite smudges and stretching counts, spray cap swaps, and counts of 8. Kids laughed, tried, failed, tried again. Rae showed the buzz-cut freshman how to ollie over a taped line. Avery taught a terrified sophomore how to land in her own feet like a promise. They were good at this. Together. Which was when the door opened and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. A woman in a camel coat and camera-ready smile strode in with a man wearing a lanyard that screamed sponsor. The coat woman's hair was perfect, her phone already filming. Rae's gut recognized the brand on the man's badge before her brain did. Ridge Spark, energy drink with a lawsuit habit. Ms. Cole. Ms. Delgado, the man boomed. So thrilled the district accepted our late-stage co-sponsorship. This is Tessa King, our social media lead. Avery went very still. Rae did too. Not because of the brand, though she had history with them and a missing check to prove it, but because Tessa King was Avery's ex. The one with the glossy podcast voice. The one who'd left for a job too big for small towns. Tessa smiled, all incisors. We're here to help you go viral. Coach Whitlock's whistle shrieked. Phones away during instruction. Tessa didn't lower hers. The internet loves a success story, she cooed, lens aimed squarely at Rae and Avery. Especially one about rivals turned lovers giving back. Rae felt Avery's gaze brush hers like a match to tinder. Clause 7 stared up from the packet in Rae's fist. Great, Rae said, smiling like a dare. Let's make sure the story we tell is ours. Chapter 2, The Sponsor Problem. The next morning, Claremont's community center looked like a crime scene dressed as a pep rally. Banners everywhere. Cameras set up in the corner. Coolers stacked with Ridge Spark cans, each one promising unleash the future. Rae stared at the logo until her jaw tightened. She remembered every ignored email, every invoice lost in accounting. Ridge Spark had sponsored her mural downtown 2 years ago, then refused to pay after she refused to paint their logo into the sky. Now she was standing under that same logo. Avery appeared beside her, adjusting a clipboard, jaw clenched. They're paying for half the equipment, she murmured. And they're threatening to pull the grant if we don't smile through it. Rae's laugh came out sharp. You mean if you don't smile through it? I don't smile. I bare teeth. Avery gave her that warning look, the one that meant not here, not yet. But Rae could see the nerves beneath the poise. Tessa's presence wasn't helping. The woman moved like she owned oxygen, hovering near the cameras, voice dripping charm. Rae Delgado, Tessa said sweetly. Still allergic to cooperation, I see. Rae turned slowly. Still editing your selfies for world peace? Avery choked on a laugh and turned it into a cough. Tessa's eyes flicked between them, calculating. We'll need a few clips for social, shots of you both teaching together, laughing, being aspirational. The network wants to feature this partnership. Partnership. The word made Rae's skin crawl. Sure, Rae said, flipping her board upright. We'll be aspirational as hell. By noon, the gym buzzed with controlled chaos. Cameras followed Rae as she spray-painted the mentorship mural on a canvas backdrop, not the real wall, district property, not for graffiti, but enough to show the kids how to shape their stories. Avery led the group through a warm-up routine, poised and glowing under the lights. Every few minutes, Tessa's voice sliced through the air. Can we get more smiles? Maybe stand closer? Clause 7, Rae muttered under her breath. Avery's reply was quiet, edged with steel. Clause 10, don't punch the sponsor. When the filming wrapped, Tessa cornered them by the bleachers, camera still rolling. One last shot. Just the two of you. Look at each other like you believe in the same dream. Rae's throat went dry. She looked at Avery, steady, composed, professional. For a heartbeat, that's all it was. Then Avery smiled, small and real. Rae forgot the cameras, the contract, the rulebook. She brushed a streak of paint from Avery's cheek with her thumb. Sorry, she murmured. The touch lingered. Long enough for the flash to go off. Long enough for Tessa's eyes to spark triumph. That's the one, Tessa said softly. Avery exhaled, barely audible. We're so fired. Rae grinned, reckless. Worth it. Chapter 3, The Viral Photo. By the next morning, Rae's phone was a crime scene. 60 unread texts. 14 missed calls. 2 separate group chats titled "Uh-oh." She'd known something was wrong the moment she stepped out of her apartment and the barista at the corner cafe winked. Cute photo, she'd said. You two are basically art. Rae didn't even need to look. She already knew which photo. By the time she made it to the studio, Avery was there, sitting on the edge of Rae's work table, jaw tight, scrolling through her own screen like it owed her blood. Rae dropped her bag. How bad? Avery turned the phone. The image filled the screen, the two of them under the banner, Rae's thumb brushing a streak of paint from Avery's cheek. The caption read, "When art meets heart, Claremont's power couple inspires the next generation." Red heart. Rae groaned. They used a heart emoji? It's everywhere, Avery said flatly. Ridge Spark posted it, the district reposted it, and Channel 9 just called asking for an interview. Rae paced the length of the studio, hands in her hair. Clause 7. We're done. Not yet, Avery said. Coach Whitlock's calling an emergency meeting this afternoon. She says we can contain the optics. Rae laughed, sharp and humorless. Contain? It's viral. I had a teenager ask if we were going to do a couple's TikTok. Avery's mouth twitched despite herself. Don't joke. Rae's tone softened. I'm not. Avery, this isn't on you. I broke the rule. I touched you. Avery looked up, eyes suddenly tired. You think I didn't want you to? The silence between them snapped like static. Rae stopped moving. You did? I've wanted to since the first day we walked back into that gym, Avery said quietly. But I can't afford to lose this grant. Or my council seat. You know what happens when a woman like me gets called unprofessional. Rae did know. Too well. Avery had spent her whole life polishing the edges of herself smooth enough to survive in rooms that chewed people like her up. Rae stepped closer. And what happens when a woman like me gets told to play nice for the cameras? You think I can survive that twice? Avery's voice cracked. You think I don't hate this? They stared at each other, both furious, both scared, both so obviously in love it hurt. Rae took a breath. Then we stopped pretending. Avery blinked. You want to go public? I want to stop living like I'm a secret worth keeping quiet, Rae said. We didn't do anything wrong. We taught kids. We showed them two people can make something beautiful together. And if that's a scandal? The studio door slammed open. Coach Whitlock filled the frame, clipboard in hand and fury in her eyes. It's worse than a scandal, she snapped. It's a lawsuit. Ridge Sparks threatening to pull funding unless we issue a joint apology video by 5 o'clock. Avery stood slowly, color draining from her face. An apology for what? Whitlock's gaze landed on Rae. For inappropriate public affection during sponsored educational programming. Their words. Rae barked a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. They sell aphrodisiac energy drinks. Avery shot her a look. Not helping. Whitlock set the clipboard down with a thud. You have a choice. Record the apology, or we lose everything. The grant, the program, your reputations. Rae folded her arms. Then we lose it. Avery's voice was low. Rae. No, Rae said, eyes hard. I'm not saying sorry for touching the woman I love. Whitlock's mouth fell open. Avery froze. And somewhere across the internet, the heart emoji burned brighter. Chapter 4: The Apology Video. By noon, the community center had been transformed into a film set again. Lights, microphones, a neutral beige backdrop, everything Ridgespark required to scrub the scandal clean. Rae sat in a folding chair that squeaked when she breathed too hard. Across from her, Avery stared down the teleprompter, reading the script projected in polite blue letters. "We're deeply sorry for allowing our personal friendship to distract from the educational mission of the mentorship program. Our goal is to be positive role models." Avery stopped mid-sentence, her voice splintering. "Friendship," she repeated quietly. Rae leaned back, arms crossed. "Guess love doesn't test well with focus groups." "Rae." Avery's tone carried warning, exhaustion, and something raw underneath. The PR manager, some 20-something in an expensive cardigan, cleared his throat. "Let's stay on message, please." Rae turned her chair to face him. "Which message? The one where we pretend we're not together, or the one where we tell kids that honesty ruins careers?" The man blinked, adjusting his headset. "Look, this isn't personal. It's optics." Rae laughed softly. "It's always optics." Avery set down the tablet. "We can't afford to lose the funding, Rae." Rae met her eyes, steady but gentler now. "We can't afford to lose ourselves either." The air between them went very still. Cameras hummed, recording everything. The PR manager whispered something into his mic that sounded suspiciously like "oh no." Rae stood. "You want a statement? Fine. Here's mine." She turned toward the nearest camera, voice low but steady. "I'm Rae Delgado. I help kids paint stories that matter. Yesterday, one of those kids asked me if loving someone could ever be wrong." She paused, gaze flicking to Avery. "I told them no. And I'm not about to start lying now." The manager sputtered, waving his hands. "We can't use that." "Then don't," Rae said. "Post the apology. Just make sure it's yours, not mine." Avery rose slowly, every muscle tight with conflict. She looked between the PR team, the hovering cameras, and Rae's defiant expression. She could save the grant with one well-placed apology. One perfect sentence. Instead, she reached up and unclipped her microphone. "You're right," she said softly. "We tell these kids to be brave every day. Maybe it's time we listen." She turned toward the same camera. "I'm Avery Cole. And I'm not sorry for loving her." The room fell silent. The PR manager's headset slid off his ear. Whitlock pinched the bridge of her nose like she was praying for divine intervention. Rae's grin was slow, incredulous. "You realize that was career suicide?" Avery took Rae's hand anyway. "Then let's die famous." Rae snorted. "You're terrible at metaphors." "You love that about me." Rae squeezed her fingers. "Yeah. I do." Outside, phones were already buzzing. The clip, unedited, raw, dangerously real, was being shared faster than any sponsorship apology ever could. By sunset, their inboxes would be chaos. By morning, there'd be interviews, think pieces, backlash, maybe even a board meeting. But right now, as the cameras finally shut off and the PR manager stormed out, Avery leaned her head against Rae's shoulder, laughing softly through her exhaustion. "I think we just started something," she whispered. Rae kissed the top of her hair. "Good. Let's finish it on our terms." Chapter 5: The Fallout. By sunrise, they were everywhere. Rae's paint-streaked hand in Avery's. The defiant tilt of Avery's chin as she said "I'm not sorry for loving her." Screenshots, clips, reaction videos. The internet spun it into myth before either of them could shower. Rae woke up to her phone vibrating against the nightstand like a living thing. Mentions. Comments. Notifications stacked like dominoes. Hashtag love is not unprofessional. Hashtag Avery and Rae. Hashtag clause 7 can choke. She blinked blearily at the trending tags before groaning into her pillow. We're famous, aren't we? Avery's voice drifted from the kitchen. Infamous. Rae rolled over. Avery was standing by the counter in one of Rae's oversized shirts, her hair half-tied and her expression somewhere between awe and impending panic. The coffee machine sputtered behind her like it was stressed out too. Rae padded over and wrapped her arms around her from behind. You made coffee. That's brave. Avery exhaled a shaky laugh. I made a mistake. I read the comments. Never read the comments. Half of them think we're heroes. And the other half? Avery hesitated. They're quoting district policy. Some are calling for my resignation. Rae kissed her shoulder. You don't owe them anything. That's easy for you to say. You don't have a career in politics. No, Rae said, just one in public scandal. That made Avery laugh, the kind of breathless, half-panicked laugh that always made Rae want to hold her closer. But then Avery's phone buzzed again, and the sound pulled her right back to earth. It's Whitlock, she said. Emergency board meeting at noon. Rae stiffened. They're going to fire you. Or both of us. Or they'll use us as an example. Maybe all three, Avery said grimly, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. Rae took hers and leaned against the counter. Do you regret it? Avery looked up sharply. What? The video. Saying it. Avery didn't answer right away. She looked out the window instead, toward the street where people were starting their day like nothing monumental had happened. Finally, she said softly, I regret that it had to be a declaration. That loving someone still needs to be defended. Rae nodded slowly. Yeah. They stood in silence for a while, two women caught between defiance and fear, trying to figure out how to live in the world they'd just changed. Then Avery set her mug down, straightened her shoulders, and squared her jaw. I'm not hiding from them. If they want to talk, I'll talk. Rae smirked. You're going to make a speech, aren't you? Avery's lips curved. I am. And I'm going to need you there. I wouldn't miss it, Rae said. But just so we're clear, if anyone throws a Ridge Spark can at you, I'm throwing it back. Avery reached up and brushed a strand of hair from Rae's face, the gesture quiet but charged. Deal. Outside, somewhere down the block, someone was already recording a TikTok about them, a romantic remix of their apology. Rae's mural studio inbox was overflowing with invitations to paint activist art. Avery's PR email was full of interview requests. They were trending for love, scandal, rebellion, and everyone had an opinion. But between the chaos and caffeine, Rae realized something simple. They weren't running anymore. Whatever came next, sponsors, headlines, or boardrooms, they'd face it the same way they faced everything else. Together. Chapter 6, The Boardroom. The district offices smelled like copier toner and fear. Rae had never liked fluorescent lighting, but this was something worse, it buzzed like judgment. Avery walked beside her, shoulders squared, every line of her body composed in that careful way that used to make Rae crazy. The kind of calm that was armor. The front desk clerk looked up, clearly aware of who they were. Her eyes widened just enough to make Rae want to smirk. She didn't. Avery had asked her to behave, and she was trying. Barely. Whitlock was waiting outside the conference room, clutching a folder that looked like it contained the weight of the world. They're already inside, she murmured. Be careful what you say. Rae leaned against the wall. What happens if I say what I think? Whitlock sighed. Then I'll have to pretend I didn't hear it. Inside, the room was all glass and tension. 6 board members sat around a polished table, faces arranged in polite neutrality. The district superintendent, a man who looked like he ironed his emotions, gestured for them to sit. Avery took the lead, voice calm. Thank you for meeting with us. I understand there have been concerns. The superintendent cleared his throat. Concerns is one word. Crisis might be another. Rae folded her arms. Depends on your definition of crisis. No one died. A few kids learned that love exists. Seems like education to me. A murmur passed around the table. Avery shot her a look that said please, for once, not today. Rae sighed but leaned back in silence. The superintendent tapped the tablet in front of him. The Ridge Spark partnership has been terminated, pending review of the program's conduct. Their statement calls the video unprofessional and inappropriate for an educational setting. Avery swallowed. Unprofessional, because I said I loved her? Because you said it on camera, one board member said. We have a code of conduct for a reason. Rae leaned forward. That code wasn't written for us. It was written to make sure people like us stay invisible. The room went quiet. Rae could feel Avery's breath catch beside her. The superintendent looked unimpressed. Miss Delgado, this isn't about orientation. It's always about orientation, Rae cut in. If I were a man, you'd be calling us inspiring. You'd have a sponsorship deal by now. Avery's hand found hers under the table, a quiet warning, but also an anchor. Before anyone could reply, the door opened. Everyone turned. A woman in her 50s stepped in, short silver hair, dark eyes that saw too much, a stack of papers in her arms. Rae didn't recognize her, but the superintendent stood immediately. Councilwoman Morales, he said, tight-lipped. I heard there was a meeting, Morales said, dropping the stack on the table. You'll want to see this. She clicked the top page forward. Headline, #Love is not unprofessional. Petition to reinstate Claremont mentorship program surpasses 200,000 signatures. The board collectively blinked. Morales smiled faintly. Seems the public disagrees with your definition of scandal. The mayor's office is already discussing policy updates to the district's conduct clauses. The world's changing, gentlemen. Maybe you should keep up. Rae bit back a grin. Avery's fingers tightened around hers. The superintendent exhaled. Councilwoman, this isn't your jurisdiction. Maybe not, she said, but it is your problem. And it looks like your problem's making you very unpopular. Avery spoke softly. We didn't plan any of this. We just stopped apologizing. Morales turned to her. That's how every revolution starts. For once, Rae was speechless. The superintendent rubbed his temples. Fine. The program remains under review. But until the policy committee reaches a decision, you're both on temporary leave. With pay. Rae blinked. Wait, did we just get a vacation? Avery's laugh was quiet, shaky, but real. Looks like it. They walked out hand in hand under a dozen disbelieving stares. Outside, in the parking lot, Rae looked up at the perfect blue sky. So, she said. First we get cancelled. Then we get reinstated. Now we're on vacation. Avery smiled, finally letting her composure crack into warmth. I vote we go somewhere with no cameras. Rae pulled her close. I vote we bring paint. Rae, Avery said, mock warning in her tone. Rae kissed her anyway, right there in front of the district office doors. Because after all that, what were they going to do, fire her twice? Chapter 7, The Getaway. The ocean didn't care about trending tags. It didn't care about sponsorships, petitions, or boardroom speeches. It just kept moving, relentless, rhythmic, free. Rae hadn't realized how badly she needed that sound until now. Waves smashing against rocks, gulls screaming overhead, wind slapping the salt into her hair. It was chaos, but it was honest chaos. Avery stood beside her at the edge of the cliff, wind tangling her hair into a halo of gold. She wore Rae's old flannel over a sundress, and somehow, she looked like every reason Rae had ever painted anything beautiful. "You're thinking too loud," Avery said, voice half lost to the wind. "I'm thinking that my therapist was right," Rae said. "I do have control issues." Avery snorted. "You brought a sketchbook, didn't you?" Rae feigned offense. "I bring my sketchbook everywhere. What if a profound moment happens?" Avery rolled her eyes. "We're supposed to be relaxing. Not documenting." "Relaxing is documentation adjacent," Rae said. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the horizon blur into mist. The cabin they'd rented sat just up the hill, 2 rooms, a fireplace, no Wi-Fi. Avery had insisted on somewhere unplugged. Rae had agreed immediately, though her hands twitched every time she thought about her unread messages. When Avery reached for her hand, Rae let her fingers thread through without thinking. It was second nature by now, their fingers always seemed to find each other even before their words did. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Avery asked softly. Rae looked at her. "You mean publicly falling on the sword of gay defiance?" "Yeah. 10 out of 10. Avery smiled faintly. "I'm serious. We didn't just blow up our careers. We blew up the system that keeps people like us out of those rooms." Rae tilted her head. "Then maybe it needed the explosion." Avery exhaled. "I spent so long trying to be perfect. Polished. Respectable. Now I'm the headline I spent my 20s avoiding." Rae stepped closer. "You're not a headline. You're a person who told the truth. That's rarer than perfection anyway." Avery's throat worked like she was swallowing a storm. "You always make it sound simple." "It is simple. It's just not easy." She leaned in, kissed her, slow, deliberate, the kind of kiss that rewired gravity. The ocean roared approval. When they finally broke apart, Avery laughed softly, breathless. "You know we can't stay here forever." "Yeah," Rae said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But we can stay for tonight. No cameras. No policies. Just us." Avery arched an eyebrow. "You're saying that like you're going to behave." "Define behave." Avery's answering look promised trouble. "You'll find out when you're not." They walked back toward the cabin as the sky turned to watercolor. Rae's hand lingered at the small of Avery's back, tracing idle shapes through the flannel. Inside, the fire crackled, soft and steady. Rae dropped her sketchbook on the table, still unopened. Avery kicked off her shoes, curling up by the hearth. "Draw something," she said. Rae smiled. "What?" "Whatever it feels like to stop hiding." Rae flipped open to a blank page, pencil hovering. For a long moment, she didn't move, just looked at Avery, all sunlight and survival. Then she began to draw. Lines became curves. Curves became softness. Softness became Avery, caught mid-laugh, hair messy, eyes bright. She wasn't posing. She was real. When Rae was done, she turned the sketchbook toward her. Avery's eyes went glassy. "That's not me," she whispered. "That's how you see me." Rae's voice was low. "That's the same thing." Avery leaned forward, kissed her again, deeper this time, with the weight of everything they'd fought for and everything they still might lose. The fire popped, the seaside, and the world outside kept spinning, louder, crueler, smaller. But in that cabin, the quiet was theirs. Chapter 8, After the Fire. By morning, the air smelled like salt and wood smoke. Avery woke to the sound of Rae pacing, muttering something about line weight and symbolism. The smell of coffee battled the smell of charcoal pencil. "You're supposed to be resting," Avery murmured, voice rough from sleep. Rae turned, hair a chaos halo, charcoal smudged on her cheek. I'm bad at resting. I start thinking about change. Then I start drawing it. Draw it quieter, Avery said, smiling. Rae grinned, but it didn't reach her eyes. We have to go back today. Avery sat up, pulling Rae's old flannel around her shoulders. You think Morales's call is a trap? Rae shrugged. She didn't exactly sound like she was inviting us to brunch. The councilwoman had left a message on both their phones just after dawn. New proposal. Immediate impact. Need you both in Claremont by noon. Avery ran a hand through her hair. She stood up for us in that meeting. She doesn't owe us more than that. Yeah, Rae said, but people like Morales don't call unless they've got a plan or a problem. Avery sighed. We're probably the problem. They drove back along the coast, windows down, silence layered over the hum of tires. Claremont appeared slowly, small, stubborn, pretending it hadn't just been the epicenter of a cultural meltdown. Outside the town hall, Morales was already waiting, leaning against her car with a folder tucked under her arm. You both look like you remembered what sleep is, she said dryly. Good. You'll need the energy. Avery crossed her arms. What's this about? Morales's expression softened. Progress. Or something like it. She handed Avery the folder. Inside was a draft resolution, full of legal phrasing and signatures in blue ink. Proposal. Removal of morality clauses from district partnerships and employment contracts. Rae blinked. Wait, this is real? Real enough to scare the superintendent, Morales said. If it passes, no one gets to weaponize professionalism against love again. But we need faces people care about to back it publicly. Avery's heart thudded once, painfully. You mean us? Morales nodded. The vote's in 2 weeks. If you speak, it changes everything. But it won't be easy. Rae glanced at Avery. When has it ever been? That night, they sat on Rae's fire escape, watching the city lights blink like static. Avery had a copy of the proposal in her lap. Her thumb traced the line that would erase the clause that nearly ruined them. I never thought I'd see something like this, she said quietly. Rae leaned against the railing. You did this. You and your perfect hair and your terrifying conviction. Avery smiled weakly. We did this. You made people care. By accidentally starting a revolution? Rae said. Sure. My finest chaos work yet. Avery looked at her, the kind of look that made Rae forget how to breathe. You think you're chaos. But you're the first thing in my life that ever made sense. Rae's heart stuttered. Careful, she whispered. That sounded dangerously like a forever statement. Maybe it was. For a moment, neither moved. The night hummed. Somewhere below, a couple argued about parking. Somewhere above, the stars pretended to mind their business. Avery broke the silence first. Do you ever think about what comes after this? After the vote, the headlines, the speeches? Rae turned to her. Yeah. I think about what it means when it's just us again. No cameras. No crisis. Just real life. Avery's voice softened. And what does that look like to you? Rae smiled faintly. Mornings that don't feel like aftermaths. Evenings where you come home and smell like coffee and sunlight. Maybe a wall we paint together and never post. Avery's throat tightened. You make it sound easy. It's not, Rae said. But it's ours. They sat there until the coffee went cold and the sky started turning silver. The city didn't know it yet, but a vote was coming that would rewrite what love could look like in public. And when it did, 2 women who'd broken every rule to be together would be sitting front row, hand in hand, ready to start again. Chapter 9, The Hearing. The city council chamber was packed. News crews lined the back wall, students filled the upper gallery with handmade signs that read things like "Love isn't a distraction" and "Let teachers be human." The air felt electric, too bright, too heavy, like the moment before a summer storm finally breaks. Rae stood near the door, sketchbook clutched like a talisman. Her palms were black with charcoal, her shirt rumpled, her pulse somewhere north of survival speed. She'd told Avery she'd wait outside the spotlight, that this was Avery's battlefield, not hers. But when the cameras turned and the murmur rose, it hit her how wrong she'd been. Avery belonged up there too, poised, strong, radiant in her gray blazer, but she shouldn't have to stand alone. Morales caught Rae's eye from the front row and gave a small nod. Now or never. The council chair banged his gavel. Next speaker, Avery Cole. Avery walked to the podium like it was a tightrope. She adjusted the mic, took a slow breath, and smiled, not the polished, rehearsed smile of the old Avery, but something gentler. "Good evening," she began. "My name is Avery Cole, and I was one of the coordinators for the Claremont Art and Athletics Mentorship Program." A pause. The room quieted. "I'm here because I broke a rule. Not a law. Not a promise. A rule." Her tone sharpened. "A rule that says caring too much, too visibly, is a liability. A rule that says professionalism and humanity can't coexist." A ripple of murmurs. The council chair frowned, already impatient. Avery didn't flinch. "I'm also here because of what happened after that. The outrage. The support. The hundreds of messages from students who said, 'Thank you for showing us love isn't unprofessional.' That told me something important, that this rule doesn't protect anyone. It only punishes authenticity." Rae's heart squeezed. The room had gone utterly still. Avery went on. "I was told I could keep my job if I apologized for loving someone. I chose to keep my integrity instead. Because what are we teaching if we reward silence and call it maturity?" She hesitated, scanning the audience. Her eyes found Rae at the back of the room. A flicker, relief, courage, something like home. Then Avery said, clear and steady, "I won't apologize for love. Not mine, not anyone's. I stand for this resolution because our students deserve mentors who don't have to hide who they are to do their jobs." The applause started small, one person, then another. Morales was the first to stand, then the kids in the balcony. Within seconds, the room was a roar. Cameras flashed like lightning. And then, from the side, a voice cut through the noise. "Excuse me," said a man in a navy suit, striding toward the front. Rae's stomach dropped. She recognized him instantly, Ridge Sparks' former regional PR director, the one who'd stiffed her on the mural payment. "I represent Ridge Spark Industries," he announced smoothly. "And before this turns into a media circus, I'd like to remind the council that our company funded this mentorship initiative. We have every right to expect adherence to our standards." Avery froze. The applause faltered. Rae moved before she could think. She walked down the aisle, sketchbook in hand, voice loud enough to carry. "Your standards," she said. "You mean the ones that left this town full of kids thinking they had to lie about who they were to be worth funding?" The man blinked. "This isn't your..." "It's exactly my business," Rae said, stepping closer. "You hired me once. You promised exposure instead of payment. You used my art, my work, and when I refused to paint your brand into the sky, you ghosted me. So forgive me if I don't trust your moral compass." The crowd gasped. Cameras turned. Rae lifted her sketchbook and flipped it open, page after page of drawings. Kids from the mentorship program. Laughing. Painting. Existing. These are your standards. These are the people you wanted to censor. You can't sell inspiration and then shame it for being real. A beat of silence. Then the man turned on his heel and left, muttering something about legal counsel. Morales smirked. "Well," she said. That'll make the 6 o'clock news. Avery exhaled shakily. Rae joined her at the podium, sliding her hand into hers. For once, no one told them to stop. The council chair cleared his throat. All in favor of adopting the resolution? Hands went up. 1. 2. Then nearly all. The gavel struck. Motion passes. The room erupted. Reporters shouted, kids cried, Morales looked smug enough to power the city grid. Avery turned to Rae, eyes wet, voice small. We did it. Rae smiled. No. You did it. I just drew the backdrop. Avery leaned in, kissed her, quick, fierce, unashamed. The applause only got louder. Chapter 10, The Quiet After. For the first time in months, the world stopped spinning. No more headlines. No camera crews camped outside Rae's studio. No district emails written in legalese. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that unnerves people who've spent too long surviving. Avery lay on the couch, bare feet tangled in Rae's blanket, laptop open but untouched. The council resolution had passed a week ago. The news cycle had already moved on to something shinier. For the first time since the chaos began, she didn't have to perform. Rae was on the floor nearby, sketchbook balanced on her knees, charcoal dust on her wrists. The apartment smelled like coffee and rain, because Rae refused to close the windows when storms rolled in. Keeps the world honest, she said. Do you ever miss it? Avery asked suddenly. Rae looked up. Miss what? The noise. The attention. The fight. Rae smirked faintly. You mean do I miss being a trending topic sandwiched between a cat meme and a congressional scandal? Hard no. Avery smiled, but there was an ache under it. I thought I'd feel relieved. Instead, I just feel suspended. Like we spent months climbing a mountain and now there's no next step. Rae studied her for a long moment. You don't have to be a cause every day, you know. Sometimes being alive is the rebellion. Avery laughed softly. That sounds like something you'd put on a mural. Rae grinned. Already did. Behind the library. No signature. That made Avery sit up. You didn't. I did. Rae's expression was unrepentant. It's subtle. Black paint, low wall. Says love is ordinary, and that's what makes it holy. Avery blinked. You made a public art piece about us? I made a public art piece about not hiding anymore, Rae corrected. But yeah, kind of. Avery leaned over and kissed her, slow and smiling. You're ridiculous. Statistically probable, Rae said against her lips. They broke apart only when Avery's phone buzzed again. She groaned. Please tell me it's spam. It's probably Morales offering you a cabinet position, Rae teased. But it wasn't. The screen read, Claremont Board, invitation to rejoin mentorship program, 2025 to 2026 term. Avery's breath hitched. They want us back. Rae blinked. Seriously? Avery nodded, scrolling. And they added a new clause. Staff may engage in personal relationships, provided they disclose conflicts of interest and maintain professionalism. Rae whistled. They actually fixed it. They actually fixed it, Avery repeated, awe softening her voice. We changed something. Rae leaned back against the couch, letting that sink in. You realize we're now part of some HR training slideshow somewhere, right? Avery laughed, real and bright. Good. Maybe it'll save someone else a headache. Rae reached for her hand. You want to go back? Avery hesitated. I do. But this time, not to prove anything. Just to be there. To help kids who need to see it's possible. Rae squeezed her fingers. Then we go back. Together. Together, Avery echoed. Outside, the rain began again, slow and steady, tapping against the windows like an old song. Rae stood, stretching, and offered Avery her hand. "Come on," she said. "Let's paint something." Avery tilted her head. "What this time?" Rae smiled, eyes glinting. "Something small. Something quiet. Something true." They spent the rest of the afternoon barefoot in the studio, paint under their nails, laughter echoing off the walls. No audience. No politics. Just color and breath and the soft certainty of a love that had survived every storm. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, the mural was finished, two silhouettes on a boardwalk, holding hands, walking toward the horizon. No names. No slogans. Just the simple fact of being seen. Avery leaned against Rae, forehead resting against her shoulder. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Rae smiled. "So are we." And for once, there was no audience to argue. Epilogue: Ordinary Miracles. Spring came late that year, like the world itself had needed extra time to recover. The trees in Claremont bloomed all at once, reckless, joyful, disobedient. Rae and Avery had learned to measure time differently now. Not in headlines or deadlines, but in the rhythm of small, human things, the smell of wet paint drying, the quiet hum of coffee in the morning, the sound of laughter that wasn't meant for anyone else to hear. The mentorship program had resumed, this time in the renovated community center downtown. The walls were covered in murals, some Rae's, some the kids', all alive with color. The rules were shorter now. Less fear, more truth. Avery sat cross-legged on the gym floor, showing a group of teenagers how to map out choreography for a performance piece. Rae watched her from across the room, sketching the moment the way she always did when Avery forgot the world was watching. She caught the spark, Avery's head tilted back, eyes alight, the kind of joy that couldn't be manufactured. Rae still thought about the first time she'd seen her like that, confident, luminous, unreachable, and how it had terrified her. How it still did, sometimes. Loving someone that much was an act of faith. When the session ended, the students filed out in clusters, talking over each other, laughing. One of them, a shy kid with pink hair and a sketchbook full of wolves and girls with lightning in their hands, lingered behind. "Ms. Delgado," they asked softly. "Can I ask something kind of weird?" Rae crouched down, smiling. "Weird questions are my favorite kind." The kid hesitated. "How do you know when something's worth fighting for?" Rae thought for a moment. "When losing it would make you smaller." They nodded slowly, eyes wide, like they were going to remember that forever. Avery came over, wiping chalk dust from her hands. "What did I miss?" Rae stood, slipping her arm around her waist. "Just another revolutionary in training." "Good," Avery said. "We'll need replacements when we're old and jaded." Rae snorted. "You'll never be jaded." "Watch me," Avery said, laughing, but her eyes were soft. That night, they walked home through the blooming streets. The world had gone mercifully back to not caring about them, and that, Rae thought, was the real victory. At the apartment, the mural on their balcony wall glowed under the city lights, a new piece, unfinished, still dripping. Two hands reaching for each other through falling petals. Avery leaned against the doorframe, watching Rae clean her brushes. "You're going to run out of walls." Rae looked over her shoulder, grinning. "I'll start painting ceilings." Avery crossed the room and kissed her, slow, unhurried, like a promise kept. When she pulled back, Rae was smiling against her lips. "What?" Avery whispered. Rae shook her head. "Nothing. Just remembering." "Remembering what?" "How we started. How sure I was that we'd burn everything down." Avery brushed her thumb along Rae's jaw. "We did." Rae's grin widened. "Yeah. And look what grew back." Months later, the the mural would fade a little under the summer sun. The hashtags would disappear, the cameras would move on, and no one would call them controversial anymore. But the kids who came through that program, the ones who watched two women refuse to apologize for loving out loud, they'd remember. And that, Rae thought, was enough. The world didn't need to watch for it to matter. Sometimes love's loudest miracle was surviving quietly. The end.